Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out another chapter of Poisoner in Chief. It's called Let This Die With Us. As Sidney Gottlieb rose into the top ranks of the CIA during the 1960s, his family life remained rich. He expanded his Virginia cabin into a split level house with large windows and modern conveniences. It was set far back from the road in a forest glen at the end of a long gravel driveway. The grounds were built around a large swimming pool. On the summer weekends, dressed only in shorts, Godley would sit cross-legged near the diving board and meditate. In his late 40s, Gottlieb was trim, fit, and handsome, with penetrating blue eyes. He rose before the sun and enjoyed being outdoors. When weather allowed, he spent hours gardening and working on his property. He liked to swim whenever he arrived at a hotel. He headed for the pool and developed an interest in sailing. He played tennis. Hours under the sun gave him a ruddy tan. Gottlieb's four children, two boys and two girls, were no more or less troublesome than any other teenagers. His wife sprinkled her letters to relatives with reports about rowdy sons and sullen daughters. She wanted them to think freely and nourish their spirituality. The way we thought about our children's upbringing in spiritual matters is that it was very important. Margaret Gottlieb wrote years later, but since Sid and I came from very different but very strong religious backgrounds, we wanted to give them the tradition of each and some knowledge of how all mankind has related to the subconscious, to the need to understand what is out there beyond. We always went to the Passover celebration at Sid's home. We spent 2 years in Germany, and by the time we came home, Sid's father was sick and then died, so we didn't go anymore. We feel that it is very important to be connected to age-old tradition, to feel that you are part of a large community, your family, your neighborhood, your school, your town, your church. I wanted my kids to have an acquaintanceship with the Bible, to have the sound of it in their ears. I wanted them to have great music, great poetry, great books, old folk tales, to have read about folk customs, to know how their ancestors lived, moved, and spoke. The elder son, Peter, was 17 years old when, in the summer of 1966, he brought home his girlfriend. She was one of his classmates at James Madison High School. Half a century later, she took back over their romance. She remembered it as a kind of going steady, puppy love, very innocent. He recollections provide a uniquely intimate view of their family. The girlfriend, who was in interview asked to be identified as Elizabeth, was delighted to fund under the Gottlieb orbit. I was a smart kid, but I came from a very Catholic background, a big family where everyone was preoccupied in the daily struggles of life, she said. The Gottlieb family was dynamic and was so different from what I experienced growing up. They would have discussions about politics and what was happening in the world. They had so many more books. Sydney had a library in a den off the eating area, and they were so much more frank and open with each other than I was used to. I remember a time when one of Peter's sisters yelled, "Oh shit, I've got my damn period again." And I thought, well, this is different. Elizabeth recalls Sydney and Margaret emerging one evening in full Bavarian costume. He wore leather breeches with suspenders, and she wore an embroidered derby. They were on their way to an evening at one of their dancing clubs. They were real folk dance, Elizabeth said, not square dance. The summer was a revelation for Elizabeth in several ways. There was no religious feelings in that household, but I would say that Sidney had mystical learning, she said. So did his wife. They would talk about esoteric subjects that never came up at my dinner table at home. I remember feeling kind of entranced by their whole dynamic as a family. It was exotic. They were very unusual people. He meditated, but they weren't wacko or anything like that. This was something I just couldn't put my finger on. Toward the end of Elizabeth's summer romance, that something suddenly came into focus. One day that summer, we were out at the house swimming. The parents had gone to the store to buy food at dinner, and Peter goes, kind of conspiratorially, "Come here, I want to show you something." He takes me into his father's den, his library, and says, "Turn around." He did something didn't want me to see what he did, and the walls of the books opened up. Behind it was all this stuff, weapons. I couldn't tell which kind, but guns. There was other kinds of stuff back there. This was like a secret compartment. I asked him, "What is that for?" He closed it back up quickly and said, "You know, my father has a price on his head." I said, "Why? Is he a criminal?" He said, "No, he works for the CIA." Then he said, "You know, my dad has killed people. He made toothpaste to kill someone." Later, he told me, "Don't tell anyone that you were in there, and don't ever tell anyone you know that my father kills people." Looking back, Elizabeth concluded that Margaret Gottlieb had to know what her husband did for a living. I also think all the kids knew about the secret compartment. She said, I just got a sense of that there was certain things that they knew they had to follow, kind of unspoken protocols. You had to honk your horn when you arrived at the bottom of the driveway. Guests could come over, but only at certain times. There were little rules they had to be followed. He explains what was behind what wall of books. There probably was a worry about security and someone coming after him. Silent CIA officers watched intently as the veterinarian anesthetized a gray and white cat on the operating table of a modern animal hospital. When the first incision drew blood, one of the spectators, an audio engineer from Gottlieb's Technical Services Division, fell faint and stepped back to sit down. The others followed the vet's every move. He implanted a tiny microphone in the cat's ear canal, connected with an ultrafine wire to a 3/4 inch long transmitter at the base of her skull, and added a packet of micro batteries as a power source. Then he screwed up his incisions. The cat awoke and, after a recovery period, behaved normally. Acoustic Kitty was conceived at the CIA's answer to a nagging surveillance program. Bugging devices that had officers placed in foreign embassies often picked up too much background noise. Someone, case officer or a tech from Gottlieb's shop, observed that cat ears, like human ears, contain a cochlea, a natural fiber that screens out much of that noise. Why not try to turn a living cat into a surveillance device? Even if it proved unable to filter out background noise, it would allow audio access to targets who allowed cats to wander through their offices or conference rooms. The idea led to many months of experimentation and ultimately the creation of Acoustic Kitty in a CIA contracted operating theater. This cat was a miracle of technology. After the operation, she showed no outward scars, walked normally, and could do everything other cats did. The microphone and transmitter implanted within her worked perfectly. Finally, the CIA handlers brought her to a park for a test mission. They pointed her in the direction of two men lost in conversation, supposedly with this command: "Listen to those two guys. Don't listen to anything else. Not the birds, not the cat or dog. Just listen to those two guys." Any cat owner could guess what happened next. The cat took a few steps toward the men and then wandered off in another direction. Technically, the audio system worked, generating a viable audio signal. According to one report of this experiment, however, control of the cat's movements, despite earlier training, proved so inconsistent that the operational utility became questionable. Over the next few weeks, Acoustic Kitty was exercised against various operation scenarios, but the results failed to improve. This absorbed project was CIA, part of the CIA effort to test the value of animals, birds, bees, dogs, dolphins, and others for electronic surveillance. No one considered it a failure. The official directive that ended in 1967 concludes that further attempts to train animals would not be practical, but adds, "The work done on this problem over the years reflects great credit on the personnel who guided it. In an earlier era, that would have been a tip to the hat to Gottlieb and his fellow craftsman scientists at the Technical Services Division. it still was, but the Acoustic Kitty project was not run by technical services alone. Officers from the new Directorate of Science and Technology, which steadily expanded into what had been Gottlieb's domain, was also involved. Technical services were able to remain autonomous and to protect MK Ultra secrets, thanks to the vigilant patronage of Richard Helms. Nonetheless, its mandates narrowed. Projects that would in the past have been its responsibility were transferred to the new directorate. Among them were behavioral experiments involving induced amnesia, implanted electrodes, and cultivation of false memory. With many of Gottlieb's responsibilities assigned to other CIA officers, MK Ultra ceased to exist. Is that a Charlie Manson song? Or is that a Tex Watson book? Ceased to exist, rewritten by the Beach Boys. As an executive active project, in 1964, the cryptonym was officially retired. A new one, MK Search, was assigned to its successor project, whose purpose was to develop a capability to manipulate human behavior in a predictable manner through the use of drugs. The work Gottlieb had pioneered would continue, but in a more conventional scientific environment and stripped of its most brutal extremes. If the demise of MK Ultra troubled Gottlieb, his concern was wiped away by the fortuitous results of unexpected turmoil at the top of the CIA. John McCone resigned as director in 1965. The tenure of his successor, Admiral William Rayburn, was brief and unhappy. When Rayburn reassigned in 1966, President Johnson chose Richard Helms to succeed him. Gottlieb's bureaucratic godfather had reached the top. The results were no longer coming. Helms named Gottlieb Chief of Technical Services Division. The chemist, whom some colleagues called that club-footed Jew, was now master of the CIA shop tool and its networks of subsidiaries around the world. We'll end this chapter here and continue on tomorrow because it's going to go into my father's friggin' casting companies. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. that Don cast. Get Smart, I Spy, and Mission Impossible. We'll talk about this tomorrow. If you like or believe anything I'm saying here and think I'm speaking any truth, I would love to earn your subscription. Have a good day.